and welcome everyone to the workshop on citizen science within research project. Still time for some people to join in if they would like to, and we'll start with an activity that is organized in order for us to know a little bit about each other and where we are. So I'm passing it over to my colleague, Claire.
Hi everyone. So my name is Clea. I work with Muki on a project called European Citizen Science. And today I'm going to share with you a Menti link. I don't know if any of you have used Mentimeter before, but if you just click on the button, this is an icebreaker. So this is just to kind of get you for us to share about different aspects of citizen science so that we all know a little bit more about each other. So if you click on it, you should already have a first question, and I'm going to share with you my screen to see the results. And so the first question is, I'd like to, sorry, I need to. Here we go. So the first question was, what words come to your mind when you hear or think of citizen science? So I know some of you already were part of the training of Muki last month, I believe, on what is citizen science. So I look forward to hear what you think what it is, but some of you also may not know so much. So it's just to kind of get an idea. Most people are choosing the word collaboration. There's community involvement, participatory engagement, communication, value creation, co-creation. It's great. It's amazing, so you can have an idea a little bit about what you all think about what citizen science is. Then we'll move on to the next slide. And now we would like to actually know in which scientific field do you work in. We want to hear about the diversity because citizen science is in many different scientific fields and it is an umbrella term, so you may know this form of participatory research in a different term depending on your field. So we have, psychology, geography, sociology, environment, social sciences, linguistics and pedagogy, geography. If you know of a term that you use in your field that relates to participatory sciences, please write it in the chat. I'd be very curious to know. Yeah. So it's sorting. Okay, cool. We have social sciences, quite a few. So there's a long history in social sciences of participatory sciences. You use the word citizen science, or you've maybe heard another term. I'd be happy to please write it in the chat. It'd be great to hear from you. Then we have environment, psychology, and geography. And your responses are linguistics, foreign language teaching, great. Okay. And the next slides. What is your interest in citizen science? Why would you like to do it? That's another question for you. Curiosity. Collaboration, real data. To know more about the methods and approaches. To connect society more to the research that is being done currently. I feel like it is a huge disconnection between the two of them. Interesting. to improve scientific communication with people, to be able to embed needs in my research and practice, to learn techniques to get people involved in methodologies, integrate citizen needs in projects, to link scientific project and society to reach a broader impact. So I think it's interesting. I feel like some of them are overlapping. There's really this kind of wish to integrate more what our society's needs in research, collaboration, real data, which is nice because a lot of people sometimes are skeptical. So good to hear that someone believes it's real data. All right, and I think we have one last question, which is, what citizen science project would you like to receive funding for? If you had a dream and you wanted to develop it with citizen science, what would it look like? That's a bit of the question. And now we will show you many different fundings, so maybe you have similar ideas, you can join forces, or you'll identify what are relevant fundings for you. So at the moment, I do not have anything in mind. Sounds good. Water use and protection. Amazing, great. Design urban areas, urban projects. Relationship between people and nature. Cool. Really nice. Loneliness, how to best tackle this modern epidemic. Interesting. Yeah. Social work. You have to dream. Dream big.
There are interesting citizen social science that we might cover or we can talk about.
All right, well, thank you very much. And now I will leave the floor to Muki that's going to continue with introduction.
Okay, so I can put the volume up. Hello, everyone, and thank you for Clea for starting us. And we will share the result of this of what you gave back as a PDF, so you can actually see it, and maybe it's useful for you for some purposes. Now, this is the plan for the afternoon. We just been through the introduction and a bit of knowing where we are coming from, and understanding what it is. The first thing that I'll do and cover for you today is to give you a bit of the policy background and to show you how things being integrated and included within the European project, and kind of show you how it is linked to open science, science with society, and the policy goal, and we have some time for discussion. At 2:40, we have Colombo Warin, who is at the Research Executive Agency. So she's responsible for a lot of projects in the climate area, and have a very long experience with citizen science. I had the luck to work with her for the past decade on different projects of citizen science, so she can give you some background on the from a perspective from the Commission on participating and including citizen science within different projects. After that, at 3, we're lucky to have Anna Berti-Suman. She's a legal scholar and she's part of a school in Rome. And she carried out her Marie Curie fellowship project within the Joint Research Center in Ispara, focusing on citizen science for legal research. So you'll have both citizen science in the environmental area, but also in areas where you won't usually see it in the area of legal scholarship. And I think that will be an interesting thing. And following that talk, I will also give you 15 minutes on the issue of writing to evaluate for evaluators. So kind of some tips about how to think about writing proposal and what kind of things you need to think when you're writing about citizen science. So that's quite a bit of information. And therefore, we will have a break at 3:30, like your time, it's an hour later, of course. All those times are European time. So after the break, we will have the experience from the perspective of EXA. So Franzi Strassman, who is one of the project officers in EXA, will tell you about what is happening and how people join proposal and how it is to work within that. And also the experience of joining a project and carrying out citizen science as a small organization. We'll hear from Mapping for Change, and we will finish. So Louise Francis is the director of Mapping for Change, which is a UK social enterprise that specializes in participatory mapping and citizen science. And I was among the founders together with Louise in 2008. But it continued to work on many European projects, so you will be able also to ask questions of Louise on that experience. And we'll finish the session with Gefion Thuermer from King's College, but also from the Open Data Institute, who will tell us about her experience in teaching people on how to get into citizen science. So she was responsible for the Impetus project, and that provided startup funding for citizen science, and she will give you a lot of experience on what you need to think about the project. Now you're very welcome as we go through this afternoon to ask questions in the chat. When I'm presenting, I won't be able to see that, but when others presenting, we will be able to see it, and we will have time to ask different questions. And I hope that you'll enjoy and find the discussion relevant and interesting for what you want to do, and it will give you a startup point for joining project and participating in them. So we can let's start. So let's start with this kind of 15 minutes on the background of the integration of citizen science into European research project. And the experience that we'll look at is the early awareness. We'll really briefly look at that, not too much, but the history of it is relevant and influential on what we do now. We'll see the current development also and support, but we'll start also to notice some of the challenges. So if you want to look at the place where things started, it's actually over 17 years ago. Jackie McGlade, who was the head of the European Environment Agency at the time, was identifying already the need to have ground data and the potential of citizen science. She was seeing different projects in different areas. And in her talk, she pointed out that often the best information comes from those who are closest to it. And it's important to harness this local knowledge if we are to tackle climate change and other environmental challenges. And indeed, the European Environment Agency was among the very first organization that started using and promoting citizen science for addressing environmental challenges. And here you see Jackie McGlade again giving a talk in the European Green Week in 2013 based on a very successful project in the UK that engaged million students between 2007 and 2012. called open air laboratories. The idea of creating a collaboration across Europe of people who are interested in citizen science gather momentum, and in 2013 it was launched, although it was until 2014 when it was actually established, and is based in Berlin, and it's a part of the Natural History Museum, but you'll hear much more about EXA later on from Francie. Going into the European area, we can see that citizen science integrated into the noticing the role of science within society. So if in the FP6, the program that was running, we're talking about early or mid 90s, the budget was very limited. By FP7, there was a much bigger contribution to science and society, and within the Horizon 2020, the program that came before the Horizon Europe that we're now experiencing, the funding was significant into the area of science with and for society. And also within Horizon 2020, we had the endorsement of citizen science by the Commissioner of Research and Innovation. So Maria Gabriel put out a note where she described citizen science, and it was also very valuable that she described citizen science in a wide way. So across the board, the definition of citizen science is not just data collection for the purpose of environmental monitoring, but notice that it is described as voluntary participation of non-professional scientists in research and innovation, so including all sorts of activities, and doing that at different stages of the process and at different level of engagement, from shaping research agenda and policies. So for the political scientists among us, we can see that that can be what's called upstream engagement, to gathering, processing, and analyzing data and assessing the outcome of research. So with this very wide understanding of citizen science, we progress towards Horizon Europe. And it's important that in Horizon Europe, it's recognized as a cross-cutting theme. So it's not something that it's a mission of it, but co-creation is mentioned in many parts of the text. And taking into account, for example, the need in the operational objective, you see the promoting the involvement of citizens and end user in co-design and co-creation process, and also pointing out in the evaluation that open science, which include citizen and societal engagement, will be operationalized throughout the program in the award criteria, in key impact pathways, and in the topic text. So not only in proposals that are in calls that are explicitly talking about citizen science, you are expected to have citizen engagement, but actually it's an award criteria across the board, and therefore have an influence across the board. And that leads to different activities, and one that is worth noticing is, say, the Plastic Pirate Go Europe, which came out of the German presidency of the EU, and then increasing engagement in citizen science in school. And it was a successful project that even went out of the boundary of Europe, including Georgia. Or we were seeing the integration of citizen science into the top quality of research in Europe, just like the ISALA project, which was funded from ERC funding and was also receiving the award for the best citizen science project in Europe. So we've seen the in the previous talk, I showed you that in Eurobarometer, both in the one that was done in 2021, but also there is a more recent one from 2024, there was explicit question to the public about the participation in scientific project or in lend your computer power to contribute to research and complex scientific question. And actually, it's interesting that as I mentioned earlier, the Romanian public expressed quite a lot of interest in the active participation. And you see that while people are showing below the European average about watching documentaries, they are expressing the interest of studying or provide personal data or other things in a higher level. And that might create for us an opportunity here for developing different research. We can also see a valuable source of information is the mutual learning exercise on citizen science initiatives. You can find it, and it's got a documents that will tell you about how research funders are interested in citizen science. So although it's very small to read, there was, for example, attention and interest in how you evaluate best practices. And there are documents on best practices in different European countries and how you should consider it for project. There was also a lot of interest in scaling up project in different ways, and in how do you enable universities and other institutions to engage in citizen science. So that one, and also another mutual learning exercise about public engagement, might be useful source for you to find information about it. Another thing that it's worth noticing is the development of the research comp, which was published last year. And that's a competency framework for researchers. So that's what is expected of researchers to know when they are developing their career. And you can think about it as even setting up the minimum standard of what people that are at PhD level or a postdoc need to learn. And one of the things that is mentioned in Research Comp is now promote citizen science. And you can see on the left the detail about what are the skills that are expected. We're working, Claire and me, on a more detailed competency framework that is specific to citizen science, but notice that now it's expected to every researcher across Europe will know how to deal with that. And that's, of course, part of the UNESCO recommendation on open science that highlight the need for citizen and participatory science, crowdsourcing, and other activities. So we see that the budget allocation in Horizon Europe, we have engagement projects that are something like 4.5% of the project, but about 1 or 2% of the budget, which as you can see, it's growing compared to the previous period. And there is a lot of investment in research infrastructure, including a current project on developing infrastructure that supports citizen science. But citizen science is also an area that shows a lot of impact, despite of the other things. So to kind of complete the presentation, let's think why all this interest, what kind of things the policymakers and the people who are promoting citizen science, what are they trying to achieve, and those kind of concepts that might be useful for us when we're writing proposal and we're thinking what the other side want to see. So of course there is the acceptance increase in scientific literacy because you are taking part of the project itself. There is also the important things that by taking part in scientific project, people will accept more research and innovation processes So things like, for example, vaccines or innovation in medicine or other things like that. In environmental monitoring, we might want to see improved biodiversity monitoring because we can't do that only with government resources, and with the participation of the population, we can increase the reach and scope of it. And that was the motivation that got the European Environment Agency interested in the first place. There is also something that links to, because we are talking about Horizon Europe, the agenda of widening participation, which Romania can benefit from, include the marginalization, both in terms of center and periphery of scientific projects across Europe, but also inside the country. And that creates all sorts of opportunities to include people in citizen science project. There is also an expectation that the researchers themselves will become more engaged with society, and there are specific programs with that to achieve the other goals. But as you could see from ResearchComp, you see that there is now expectation for the researchers to be engaged more with society. Then there is the development of innovation, which is always important in European funding. And those can be frugal or not, but they can be based on this collective knowledge of a lot of people and connected to the improved biodiversity monitoring. We shouldn't forget that having volunteers involved in different activities does reduce the cost and increase the ability to carry out different projects. Now, it's not possible to achieve all the policy goals all at once. Although people might want to achieve them, you can select which one are relevant to your purpose. So that's sort of an introduction to the policy goals, and I wanted to check if you have any questions about it. One. Okay. So if
you
we
were
are
very clear, Muki. Nobody has a question for you.
yeah, I have to say, and it's good. So we are ahead of time. And Colombe, I'll first of all welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining the meeting. And we have here a crowd that is coming from different areas, including social science, political science, natural science, and environmental science. So really a wide range of areas that can cover. And now it's over to you if you want to share the slides.
I try to share. I see the button here. Select
Yeah, you are now a co-host.
Wait a sec. I have to find out on my computer. Let me see this. Oops, I have plenty of things open. Let me open that. So I begin. Just tell me if you see it or not yet. No. So let me see how I do that. I don't know. Now probably you see it, but not correctly. Oops. Do you see it now? Do you see it?
But we can see it with
the
notes.
speaker.
Sorry?
We see it. We see the notes. So
Okay, but there's no notes.
No.
So, sorry, I'm not sure I can do better than that. but I have it full on my screen. I have two screens, so yeah, sorry for that. I put it in full screen. There's no note, so you cannot see it very big, but okay. But there's not so many things on the slide, so I think you will be able to cover that. So let me just introduce myself to begin with. So my name is Colombe. I work at the European Commission for the past now 14 years. I joined in 2011. And I had really a background on social science, political sciences, and European affairs. And during my career, I really focused on projects on environment first. And then I must say I came to citizen science, which is a subject that I really is close to my heart and that I covered for the past 6 years, more or less. With a number of projects, EU-funded projects that I monitor. So I try to answer what Muki asked me to do and to give you a bit of flavor of what's going on in REA around citizen science projects. But to begin with, I wanted to explain what is REA, because I don't know if all of you are very familiar with it. So REA is the European Research Executive Agency, is one of the 6 agencies of the European Commission. So to be clear, since 2015, more or less, most of the programs of the framework program of research, which was called FP7, then Horizon 2020, Muki said, and now Horizon Europe, were firstly managed in DG Research, which was the Director General of the European Commission dealing with that, but little by little, most programs were then channeled to agencies. So the Directorate General continues to work on the policy side, and the agency is implementing the project. And when I say implemented, is evaluating the projects that Muki mentioned, monitoring the project, paying the project, and doing what we call in a little EU jargon, the policy feedback. So we exploit the results from the projects in order to feed the policy. When I talked about REA, I talk in general. So we have mainly now at the moment in Horizon Europe, we are monitoring 7 Horizon Europe EU programs, also including the legacy of Horizon 2020, which is still there. You see the figure on the slide, 22.7 billion. And we cooperate with 7 director generals. And I wanted to mention that today, because one of the aspects of citizen science is the co-creation, as Muki just mentioned. And what we are doing even now at the Commission's level, among the different services that we call Director General, is that we co-create the work programs that will be finally the calls for the funding for the project to be funded. And that's a very interesting part. So let me go to the second slide. So the next slide. So as I said, REA is doing really evaluating, funding, managing projects, Horizon Europe, Horizon 2020. We have also 2 most smaller but important as well programs that are outside Horizon that we also manage. And we also have some kind of cross more administrative issues that we have, because we manage a lot of experts, we manage many evaluations, I must say, and all this is also done by REA. The Research Inquiry Service, as researcher, you may have heard about it. It's a service that you have when you need to ask a question. So in fact, you ask a question to my colleagues, they are here working at REA. If, for example, one of them cannot answer properly the question, then if it's relevant to my service or my projects, the question comes to me, I provide the question and you get the answer. I think it's a very, I don't know if it's so quick for the answer when it has to reach somebody else, but definitely you always get an answer, just for make sure that even if we are a big institution, you get an answer when you ask a question. And that's the little panorama that I wanted to show you. And I know that some of these aspects will be developed today, this afternoon. So I was happy to give a little glance of that, also with figures. I think it's always interesting to have figures. So Marie Skłodowska-Curie, as you know, is really for me the Erasmus for researchers. And I hope some of you will benefit from it because it's an excellent scheme. It's managed in our department A. Research infrastructure maybe later, bigger program with a lot of budget as well. It's managed by us, and then we have these different programs. And I will focus mainly on these two that I highlighted downstairs. So the first one on the far right is the reforming and enhancing European research and innovation. In our little jargon here, it's the successor of Science with and for Society, the one that was really, developed and really with more budget under Horizon 2020. So it's mainly what we call the cross-cutting issues in research. And so ethics, open science, and one aspect, of course, is citizen science. So here in this specific program, we fund projects of citizen science that are mainly focusing on that. And myself, I work now for the past 4 years in the program that is highlighted with the star, the orange star. And it's a big program with everything regarding environment in a broad way. But it is, of course, anything regarding, I don't know, biodiversity monitoring, forest restoration and things like that, bioeconomy, circular economy, all these. But what we also realized in this program is that we cannot do that only at the research side, but we have to do that closer to citizens. So I will explain later how we do involve, even in this program, citizen science, and it's not only on reforming and enhancing Europe research and innovation. I like this slide because you also see the little galaxy of our director generals that we have in the European Commission. And I think it's something that is also more and more important, and it will be even more important for the next program, FP10, which is under negotiation at the moment, and that will begin in 2028. Is that many director generals are involved in the framing with this co-creation exercise that I briefly mentioned before with DG Research. So DG Research remains our main body and our main funding body for everything regarding research and innovation, but all these different DGs are involved. And myself, I do work on a daily basis with DG Research, DG Environment, and DG Agriculture. And I will explain also later how those aspects of co-creation, but also do as the integration of more citizens' participations in this program is becoming more and more important. Muki did really the broad framework, policy framework, and explained the origins of citizen science and how it becomes a key topic. This is, I liked very much the definition of Maria Gabriela, former commissioner. Now we stick to this one, which is really about the co-design, co-creation, and co-assessment. And I like this co in each aspect of the definition. And you have to know that this is really now part of any designing of the programs and the work programs. What I call the work program, sorry for the jargon sometimes, it's really the big, the place where we draft the calls that will then lead to funded projects. And we call that the work program. So we have the framework program, Horizon Europe, and then within the framework program, we have a work program that normally we reassess every 1 year or 2 years. At the moment, because we had a change in the commission, as you know, Ursula von der Leyen has been appointed as president. We have now 2025 that we are assessing now. And the next February, I think we will have the program for 2026. So this is called the work program. But the work program to be designed with the different services that I mentioned before are also anchoring some key aspects of the policy agenda. And citizens' engagement is a key part of the policy agenda. I didn't show you the main framework of Horizon Europe, but there are 3 pillars in Horizon Europe. And the second pillar, the one where I work at the moment on environment and biodiversity, is called the societal challenges. And you see in this terminology the importance of citizens there. So at the moment in REA, we have a number of projects, and I know some of them will be developed and presented in broad details, but I just want to do here a mapping. So we have different aspects that we find important in how to engage the citizens' participations. So the first one is very nice, and I hope some of you have attended it. it's the EU context for young scientists. It's fully funded by the European Commission, and it's also managed by one of our unit here in REA, and it's really promoting the young scientific talent across Europe, and with very nice prices and very good and very good outcome also at the press level, I must say. Then we have this aspect, and when I talk about citizen science, of course, we are totally focusing on research, but we cannot say we are looking at research and not at the rest of the world. So there is also outside around us a political situation, and you may all know that the political situation is can be a bit challenging in some member states. We have seen the Brexit, unfortunately, happening, and we have seen also the rise of populism in some member states lately, some other problems with Russian interference and things like that. And we do think that this trust in science, the trust in citizens, and the fact to make closer link between citizens and research, and in general about EU programs and what the European Commission is doing is super important. So we have, there are projects there, there are the links to the projects, so you can also look at them. But this aspect of trust in science is particularly important. We also remember, cannot forget, the famous COVID situation that happened, and these aspects about the vaccine, anti-vaccine people. So all these aspects have to be, I think, tackled in the projects we do, and this is part of this second item that I have on there. Now, of course, you mentioned MOOCI, the European Citizen Science Platform, and this is a very important one. We realized that at the EU level, there are, of course, different development according to the member states. Some member states are have citizen science higher on the agenda, others less, but of course this is moving. But what is super important, and I put this this little box here in white, is to have a common repository, a way where we find all the information we need about citizen science at the EU level, because we have this diversity and every aspects that I mentioned before. And I can tell you that the reference to EXA now has been even added in some of the calls that we are drafting now for the applicants. So meaning, because MOOCI mentioned this famous evaluation scheme that we have to evaluate projects. You know, all projects are evaluated by external experts that we hire, and in total independence, of course. And those experts, they also, so in some of the calls that, and I will mention one at the end of my presentation, mention the fact that the project should work together with EXA, and that's an important point. Impetus, the Rewarding Excellent Citizen Science Initiatives, Impetus, I know it will be also broadly presented today, so I'm not going into detail, and everything regarding the citizen science practices and the EU-wide network of all these citizens projects, and we have some running at the moment. So this is really a bit the panorama of the running projects at the moment that I wanted to do to present you. And I want also to explain the way we work in these different projects that we fund at EU level. It's not that there's only the project itself working very nicely together with the different partners of the EU project, but there's also an exercise that we do at the EU level, is to bring together, sometimes, like I would say, on an annual basis, not to be a burden, and because each project has its description of action to implement, obviously. But we do gather the projects that are around the same theme, a research theme, obviously, and here citizen science. And we had last June a very nice gathering of all the citizen science project, together with an award ceremony for some of the best project that could get an award, I mean, given by my director. And this position paper that I encourage you to read after this presentation. So this is the way we work, to be as close as possible to the projects and to make sure that all the projects do participate together and exchange and together. And this is reaching the end of my presentation. I want to explain something about the citizen science in the Horizon Europe goals, because we mentioned a lot of Horizon 2020, but how does it work in the goals? So obviously you understood that there's this famous program specifically on the cross-cutting issues, and citizen science is a big part of it. Those are my colleagues in Unit C4 dealing with that. Then, because we discovered that's not enough just to have a niche part with where we have all the citizens project, but that in other aspects of these famous societal challenges that I mentioned, we also need to incorporate this citizen participation way. And here on the slide, you see Increase, which is one project that I monitored, and it comes totally from my program, which is on environment. And this one was particularly targeting the fact to develop lupin and all kind of beans to make sure that we have less impact on the environment with all the meat, and especially beef meat and things like that, and that we explain the importance maybe to change a bit the diet and to be closer to the environment. And this particular project, Increase, had a whole work package on citizen science, which was to send around Europe seeds and make citizens plant those different type of lupin beans on their balcony or on their garden when they had a garden, and to see it grow and to make this participation at the EU level. I was particularly happy because at the beginning, this was just one work package. We have normally 8 to 9 work packages in an EU project, and this part has been really developed in a very nice way, I must say, and they won a prize, this famous grand prize of the citizen science last year, not this year. So I was particularly proud of that. So this project was led by the University of Ancona in Italy. And last but not least, that's on my screen. That's a new topic that has been included in my work program, the one on biodiversity, the one I deal with. And this work program was totally on citizen science. It was one topic, 4 million euros, to strengthen the capacity of citizen science in biodiversity. And so this is under evaluation at the moment. The results will be known just before Christmas. And this project, the one that will be awarded, there will be unfortunately only one at the moment, will really monitor all these aspects of citizen science, particularly on biodiversity. So those are 3 examples of how we can embed citizen science in the different projects. So there are different levels, as you see. But I must say, and I'm quite confident that even in Horizon Europe, the next framework program number 10, this will be developed, because the importance of having the citizens aspects in the project is particularly important. And because you're here and I know you're interested in what we do, I wanted to have my final slide on everything that we need to have always new evaluators. Muki mentioned the award criterion that we have. You may be familiar or not, but we always evaluate proposals in REA and in all Horizon Europe with 3 criteria. So the first one is excellence. This is about the research. The second one is about the impact. And this covers, of course, everything regarding the communication, dissemination, exploitation of the project. And the third one is about implementation. And this open science and also citizen science aspects can be on the first criterion of excellence. So if you want to become an evaluator, you first have to register on this list. Yes, I'm happy to take any questions. I will close that so that... it's still there. Yes, I will stop the sharing. So, yeah. And I'm open to questions, if any.
Thank you very much, Corum. Yeah, and we do have, so Lucrina.
Before I ask my question, I would like to see if the others have questions, because I should let them go first and then. So, sorry, anybody else does have questions?
Someone need to start, so you start.
So my question is for Mr. Warren, Mrs. Warren, do you think that, how would you think the funding of the citizen science project would be more efficient? Like, for example, having more cascading grants projects such as Impetus or Science Us or others, or funding more projects at local level to increase the engagement. Because, for example, I'm speaking from the Romanian context. We don't have very much access to cascading grants, so there is a lot of competition from the more developed, more experienced countries like Italy, Spain. We know they've got a lot of citizen science grants, and for us, participating in a competition with them is not very easy. So how do you see this efficiency of funding the citizen science, especially in other countries than those who are already experienced?
Yeah, I do understand perfectly your question, and also regarding the difficulty to get funding from the EU. I worked 7 years on the Spreading Excellence and Widening Participation scheme. So this is the one that is directed, as you know, to mostly Central and European member states, and also Cyprus and Malta. And indeed, this is I see in some projects that I monitored regarding citizen science, any aspect of mentorship among member states. You know, one partner explaining or visiting another member state and explaining the way they are developing citizen science activities in order to make these other member states or organizations, of course, more competitive. Now, when you talk about cascading grants, I just have a question, because we do use cascading grants in some of our projects. So in fact, there are two ways, but one is better. Either we decide that in the core of the project, and we draft that in this particular project, we will need a cascading grant scheme in order to reach better the local level. And here I see really for you, but I mean for anybody, I mean really interested and having a good citizen science activities, a benefit, because it's a small grant. Obviously, it's a grant normally between 50,000 to 80,000 euros, but it's really going at the local level to fund an activity. It can be regarding citizen science, because we're talking about that. I have one on taxonomy at the moment with one of my projects, and the 20 projects that have been funded, pilots, really relevant and things like that. I don't think, if it's your question, I'm not sure that we will really generalize these cascading grant aspects in many topics of Horizon Europe. And I explain you why. It's quite a heavy mechanism for the applicant, because they have to follow all our rules about best value for money, blah, 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 all the, and I say that, of course, and I found it absolutely normal to do it, but it's a big, I would say, administrative burden. I have done that 3 times, not me, obviously, but I have had 3 projects implementing cascading grants. They did it perfectly, and the result for me is amazing. But it's true that it's an additional administrative burden on the applicant. And some of them had even to hire a private company to help them in doing that, because this is not the core business of a researcher, I must say, although the results are excellent. Now, there are also, if your question is, Lukrina, is your question also, it's easier maybe to start with a cascading grant rather than to start with an EU project? Is that your question or not?
No, you answered my question, because I also believe that cascading grants are rather difficult and administratively very hard to. So my question is whether it will be simpler to find another funding scheme except the cascading grants, so as to avoid these large projects that are always doing
Okay.
administrative
Okay,
things
I see
for
your point.
cascading. Maybe split the amount in smaller amounts so that more competitors can have access to that. And so avoid these cascading grant projects that are
Okay.
difficult and they go very slow.
Okay. So to be honest, so the tendency, I must say, is not to go for smaller grants, at least in Horizon Europe. We have smaller grants in other schemes like Creative Europe, Erasmus, all schemes on education, and really targeting NGOs, and we know they don't have the financial capacity to really run very big grants like 3 million, 4 million, I know it's a lot. But the possibility for that, without having to handle cascading grants, we have what we call, in again our little EU jargon, the partnership. So the partnership is a bigger project that is co-funded between Horizon Europe and the member states. And this is huge money in general. We have one, for example, in biodiversity called Biodiversa Plus. And this project as such, which is a huge project, run by a university or a research institute, and really in close partnership with the member states, they do organize grants. I don't know how to say that. Smaller grants with a jury and at different moments of the year. And they do apply, this smaller grants aspect that you mentioned. So far, they have not done especially something on citizen science, but this can be possible in the future because it's really linked to the demand coming from all the projects that are part of the board of this Biodiversa Plus. So if you say this is an item that is very important and that several projects agree with that, then there can be a call for, we call it expression of interest, or I don't know how we call it exactly, but to run that. But at the EU level, managed by the European Commission, the way we handle evaluations, unfortunately, Lukrina, we are not really going for smaller grants. But you can be a partner in a bigger project with a smaller part of the budget. So meaning that even if the total budget is 4 million, as I mentioned, for this citizen science project that will begin, if there are 15 partners in the project, one partner can have a less big amount and it's easier to handle and things like that. But the local level, we can do it, for me, in two ways. So either with this smaller grants that are given either by Biodiversa Plus or cascading grants, or but what we call, but this is mainly in what we call the RIA, so the Research and Innovation Actions, pilots. We ask the project to develop pilots, case studies, whatever you call them, demo sites or whatever. And those projects, so those demo sites, pilots are run in different member states at really the local level and with a smaller amount of money coming from the project coordinators in general. So for me, this is a nice way to enter an EU project to begin with, to see, okay, will I like it? Will it be interesting? Because that's also a way that you visit other pilots and you understand how they work in the other member states. I think this is the beauty for me of an EU project, is to go out also of just your member states and your ways of doing, and to learn and to teach also the others what is going well in your organizations, and to explain. And I think this is what at the end EU projects are for. Yes, so those are for me the two ways I see to get the money. But I would also encourage some of you, because I know there are presentation in each member states by what we call the NCP, the national contact point. So there is, for each program of Horizon Europe, a national contact point, a person, normally belonging to the Ministry of Research, in most member states, and they are there to explain also the rules and to sometimes help you identify the correct way, the correct calls and work programs where you could apply, because it's very big and I know sometimes not easy to get everything. So I hope, Lukrina, I kind of gave you the appetite to go further.
We'll also cover the affiliated entities, I think,
Excellent.
part of EXA, which is another mechanism.
Yes.
And finally, again, going back to what Colombe mentioned earlier, the widening it's extremely competitive in the last 2 rounds, but still there are mechanisms there, twinning, teaming, other things worth looking at this. You can work with very supportive organizations, and again, EXA can help in facilitating it.
I want to reply to a question of Diana that I saw popping.
Yes.
Because it's a good question. So, yeah, indeed. How do I build my consortium? How can I find people that are interested and maybe they are in my topic and things like that? So each of these different programs that I presented on the screen are organizing before each call what we call an info day. And the info day is really an hybrid, so it's in Brussels, but it's also online presentation of each of the specific topics. So for example, my info day will take place on the 22nd and 23rd of January in Brussels and online. But before the 22nd and 23rd, there is one day, the 21st, which is organized by the famous national contact points that I mentioned. So this is and they organize and this is in Brussels, by the way, matching meetings in order to make sure people kind of find new partners and anybody. So this one is totally focused on environment, bioeconomy, agri products and things like that. So I don't know if it's exactly the field that you are interested in, but I encourage you to go on the website, because each of the different programs that you may be interested in is organizing an info day. This is compulsory. And around that, so besides the normal presentations of the topics, there is this matchmaking exercise that we do. Last year, by the way, we organized it in Poland in order to have more applicants from the widening countries. It was organized in Warsaw last year, and this time it's in Brussels again. But there are also these opportunities that Muki just mentioned. Yeah.
Thank you very, very much, Colombe. Always lovely to see you.
I will stay a bit, but I will have to disappear just before the break.
Okay.
Okay. But
Thank
happy
you
to be
very
here
much.
and to listen to you.
And
so Diana, you're happy with my answer? I'm happy.
Yeah. And another one, by the way, Diana, is that there are some commercial matchmaking platform like this one. So our next speaker is Berti-Suman, who can talk about her Marie Curie experience. Over to you, Anna. You should have the share button, so you should be able to present.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hope you can hear me and see me well from Rome right now, Italy. I will just jump into my screen sharing. The agenda is quite tight and I haven't seen space for Q&A. So I don't know if I can then have a small Q&A moment as well.
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Great.
Of course, if someone asking, we will be adjusting things.
Okay, great.
I can always shorten my part.
All right, but we should be able. Okay, hi everyone. I hope you can now see my screen well. I am Anna. I'm currently speaking to you as a Mary Zlotowska-Curie Action postdoctoral fellow alumna. My Marie Curie ended in 2023, so let's say not too far from now, and I'm still working in the field, so I would say I'm still quite connected to it, although of course the project closed. And Muki, who I actually thank, invited me to share with you some experience on the integration of citizen science in a Marie Curie application. Which was, let's say,
quite successful if we look at some years later, as still the project is active, and even if the funding closed, there's a lot of interest across it, and some kind of spin-off projects derived from it. And one of it in particular, I will cite it to you at the end, because it has a case study in Romania on illegal forest logging. So it may be of interest for you. It's on Horizon Europe. Okay, so let me start. So the first point that I wanted to share with you is that I came to the word of Marie Curie applications from the perspective of an environmental lawyer. And generally, environmental legal scholars and generally legal scholars do not work that often with citizen science. So for me, my Marie Curie application was also a way to bridge my legal practice as an environmental lawyer with my scientific interest in citizen science. And I witnessed citizen science the first time some years earlier than my Marie Curie application, when I was working as a young lawyer for an association called the Union of Affected People by Chevron Texaco, which is an association that represents the victims of a large oil company who damaged the environment of the Amazon rainforest and the health of the local inhabitants. There, I actually saw the my first experience of citizen science, because local people were mapping through drones, geospatial intelligence, in situ data, the expansion of legal and illegal oil extraction activities. And I developed an interest. Then somehow I kept this interest with me throughout my PhD. But during my PhD, I was focused more on disaster risk response and how citizen science could be integrated in policies over environmental risk management. There was, however, this element of how to bring citizen science in judicial space, in court cases, because actually in the case of the picture that you see, there was a long-lasting oil contamination case in front of a local court and international courts. And I really wanted to have the data collected by citizen scientists, civic sentinels, valorized also for judicial applications, so for court proceedings. So from this, the idea to look at the case studies closer to my reality, which was the case of Basilicata. I'm from Italy, and Basilicata is located in the south of Italy. And actually, during my PhD, which I performed in the Netherlands, I discovered that there were similar activities of citizen science being performed in the south of Italy, somehow at the margins of our classical European borders, because these were very rural, very far away from main cities contexts. And so my idea was to study citizen science in the locations that were somehow the peripheries of the EU, more geographical peripheries, also the south of the north, I framed it, because we are somehow the north of the world, but these very marginalized rural areas impacted by oil activities were somehow a south. And I decided to bridge these with my legal frame. And so from there, the question was how local people gather environmental data to demonstrate environmental damage in court. So really in judicial contexts. So this was my research topic, how civic evidence can demonstrate environmental harms in judicial settings, but there was also interest in mediation, so in how to avoid the court cases looking at indeed conflict mediation techniques through citizen science. So citizen science as a way also to bring people together and to enter in a dialogue without necessarily escalating to a court case. And the third point was to search whether we could frame a new right, a right to contribute environmental information. And these authors show that actually, even from a legal scholar perspective, it made a lot of sense to integrate citizen science for the production of unusual evidence in Marie Curie applications. So of course, compared to more like typologies of Marie Curie projects that really develop a citizen science project, I didn't develop any new one. I was looking at existing ones that had the aim or even managed to bring evidence in court cases. The project, I decided to call it Sensing for Justice, and there is a still active website. It's been on and off because it's actually made by myself and it's free, so sometimes it disappears. But the good thing was also that I could host this project in an entity that is a bit unusual, perhaps, for many of you, because it's not a university, it's a center of research from the European Commission. It's called the Joint Research Center, and this was the Northern Italy site. I had a very good match with my mentor, Sven Schade, who was in my PhD committee when I was in the Netherlands and who hosted me for a series of visiting, which was also very effective. So something that I would like to stress for you is if you can, please spend some time to visit the institution before you write your application with this institution, also to understand what are the key selling points that would make a reviewer do, haha, this is a very good match. And also to understand what are the priorities of this institution that you could somehow meet through your project. And in particular, this unit, the unit where I visited, really had an interest for the institutional uptake of citizen science, and they didn't have any person expert in legal judicial matters. So I could contribute on this perspective, and they could give me a lot of experience on the systematization of large data sets of citizen science cases, and also connection to the possibility to have a strong policy impact, because they were very much connected to European Commission policies, and also to, for example, the network of European environmental agencies. So the project somehow moved both through identifying actual cases of the use of citizen science for demonstrating harms, but also identifying all these supporting networks that made it possible for a case to end up successfully in a court, or also what were the barriers that prevented it from happening. And the participatory dimension of the projects has been, let's say, threefold, if we can say. First, as I embedded ethnographic approach to my research, as I decided to shadow the sentinel, observe the local sentinels, going to the site physically and observing them slowly, acting in their daily context. Second, I decided to perform research using this so-called method of research creation, which consider artistic practices as a way to stimulate engagement from your research participants. So really using art as an instrument of research, of eliciting research data. And lastly, using engaging strategies to disseminate results, to make your results more accessible for the public. So you will see some visuals, and these are exactly an exemplification of how we try to digest some complex legal meanings into accessible outcomes. In my proposal, I made this kind of visualization table, and I particularly focused on these cross-cutting, more engagement and dissemination moments. And in particular, the public website with the blog and a forum part where people could alert me on an interesting case or ask a legal question was very effective, because I kept receiving a lot of engagement from just people that I would not have reached otherwise. Then, of course, we tried to be very present in public spaces like libraries, festival like climate festivals, and also to create some outcomes like a podcast and some booklets that were very kind of needed for our target communities, which were not only civil society, but also their supporting networks like NGOs. I will now essentially move to just some visualization to show you a bit of what I mentioned. One was this slow ethnography approach, where I was walking together with the local sentinels and observed their daily action and practices. Another approach was to use visual mediation, so to include graphic novels, starting really from the consent forms, to have a way to also bring a change in the way legal matters were communicated to the public and to our target audience. And this has not been always easy, because of course we also had to have the traditional consent form all written with lengthy words, but at the same time, it would not have made sense to have them alone, as our users were essentially farmers, breeders, people with somehow low literacy. Graphic novels were very effective as both a communication and engagement tool. And this was something that was praised throughout the project, because it was something that it was quite unusual in the context. And it was a good way to also attract other case studies, and also to engage people beyond our usual suspects. For example, we also experienced a bit more with other forms, like making clay sculptures, to discuss what does it mean to be an environmental victim or an environmental displaced person. And this was very effective to really have fun while doing something very serious. And we created a collective installation. The sensorial walks have been organized in connection with this type of intervention to reflect on what it means to be a sentinels, at the same time gathering environmental data on the surrounding context. Like, for example, this was a very dry year, and we tried to feel how the earth was suffering. In this case, sensorial walks, of course, in a park in Milan is very different from in oil-affected sites. So we also had to think to the type of data collection that we could do through this sensorial experience. And lastly, which I would say was quite ambitious, was to organize theatrical performance where a monologue was staged based on one case study, and the theatrical performance itself became a moment for legal discussion, because we were really talking about a real case, but with an engagement approach that enabled people in the audience to really freely share also their feelings in connection to, for example, environmental losses. And of course, I hope you can still engage with the webpage. It's out there. It's quite basic, but actually very visual. And our impact has been multiple. We've been invited in many schools, which was something that I personally didn't expect, to go to school children and talk about this complex topic. and some recognition from honorary mention to journalistic awards, to science and arts recognition. And what I would say was more rewarding has been this Falling Walls Science Engagement Breakthrough of the Year and the JRC Young Scientist Award. So both of them were focused on this idea of like promoting environmental sensing for justice, which was really the mission of the project. And now that I'm wrapping up all this, I would like to mention that an Horizon Europe project was written learning a bit from the experience of Sensing for Justice. I was just very minimally engaged in the writing as I was at the time with the JRC, and of course I couldn't be engaged. I just shared all the open access materials that the project produced. And the Enforce project is now live and running, focusing on how citizen science can promote environmental compliance assurance with 8 case studies across Europe. One of it is located in Brasov in Romania, looking at how citizen science can prevent forest losses and environmental crimes connected to wood harvesting. And I would like also to stress that currently I'm following for an NGO, Asud, based in Rome, a case of environmental contamination case connected to a landfill, very notorious for also an EU infringement proceeding against Italy. So in a way, it was also through this project an opportunity for me to reconnect with my own country, because I was expatriated. I actually had left my country for many years, from Latin America to the Netherlands. And so I could present my Mercury with my country because I was away for enough years to then return with my Mercury. So I would like to thank you all for your time, and I'm happy to answer any question that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. It was fantastic explanation of also how it's integrated into the project, and wonderful to see all your achievement since then. So any questions? Anyone would like to ask a question? No? Okay. So Anna will be with us until the break.
Yes.
If anyone kind of think about the question, do feel free to ask in the chat. And I'll do a short version of my presentation so we can still have our break, because we do need it. And what I will show you in the next thing is, if we're looking at different types of proposals, also some kind of experience that I developed. So I've run both a program for Marie Curie applicants, so to try and help them in the process of applying. And I was involved as an ERC panelist and in European proposals. So another proposal, the last one, was the Dutch citizen open science application. And what kind of recommendation do I have to do that? So first of all, remember that failure is just part of the system, actually. Even a very good success rate of 30%, if you meet someone who's got a success rate of 30%, still mean that for each success, there are 2 failures. And that's the way that academic funding works. And there is an attention within different funders about the level of funding, but research does become competitive, and you need to kind of think about this aspect of it. And I would say you really need to develop this strategy to failure, about not giving up and continue to try and progressing, and basically in a way to reuse the ideas and move them forward. So what kind of principle would I suggest to you? So the best proposal that I've seen over the years are one that are concentrated around the reviewers. So, for example, Colombe mentioned to you what are the criteria. And a lot of time, even in Marie Curie or in other proposals, you can download what will be the evaluations that the evaluators will use. And therefore, you need to think about what it is that they would like to see and how you can give them the information in such a way that it's easier for them to say yes. And one way to think about it is objections. And objections are reason to reject your proposal. And if you address them explicitly, you are actually improving the situation. So don't expect the reviewers to be clever enough and to deduce that you will address an issue. Give them the information directly. And also remember that the reviewers, most of the time, are non-expert in your specific discipline or area. Even if they are from your area, you need to consider that this aspect. There is an issue of right for criteria and few other things, but I want to kind of demonstrate to you some of these aspects. So the idea, for example, with the Marie Curie, or in this case with the ERC, you kind of can look at the evaluation criteria itself. So you see that there is the excellence, the impact, and quality and efficiency. And in the case of, say, ERC, you see that there are really specific questions that are being asked. And what you can do is to copy those questions into your proposal and then make sure that you have addressed each one of them. And you can reach out to the evaluator and ask them to get the evaluation form so you have a good idea about how it will be evaluated. In objections, what we mean is a technique that will help you to address this. Now, what's happened when there is very high competition is reviewers are looking for reason to eliminate proposal. They have really good set of proposal and they need to think which one are not reaching the top level. And to do that, they are looking for reasons why there are some issues with proposal. So you can think about what questions will people raise and then address them. So here is an example of it. Although, say, in some proposal that I'm writing, ethical issues are being said, oh, you can write it as an ethical appendix in different parts. Actually, you know that in the case of citizen science, the reviewers will ask it. So adding a very short paragraph that explain, in this case, that you will work with indigenous people in a very careful and measured way, kind of alleviate the concern of the reviewers about this issue. So what are the common objections that are coming in with our area of citizen science? And think about how you can address them. So first of all, there is the data quality in terms of the collection of the data. How can you ensure that the data is collected properly when we're talking about non-professional data collectors? Then there is also consider the data quality of the outputs if they are involved in it. And also consider how you address the different uncertainties that are caused by this participatory process. You will also have a set of questions that will be result of if someone who is familiar with the area will ask about. So for example, an expert in the area will say, so how exactly you are going to engage your audience and what will be the process of recruitment that you will follow? So make sure that you cover that. Also, there is a lot of issues, and that's a problem that I experienced many times in application, is that I describe in a lot of detail the co-production process, but I left the goal or the aim of the project open because I wanted it to be co-created with the community, so I didn't want to define it. The problem is that for the reviewers, that doesn't give a clear idea about what will happen with it. So they're clear that you are participating with someone, but what for? So you need to kind of explain that and give a very clear example, and that's where this constructive ambiguity is important, because you write it in such a way that will allow you to do what you want to do, the collaboration in a more open way, but while you are giving to the reviewers a really good idea of what will come out of it. You also remember that with the recruitment come also the retainment, especially if we are talking about a long project, you'll need to consider it. The other aspects that you need to consider is that if you haven't clarified how the data or how the outcomes will be used, people will look at it and say, no, that's not citizen science, that's just public engagement, and we don't need to include it. We mentioned the ethics, which is the next set of issues. You might have issues with lack of inclusiveness. That might be the case and it's appropriate, but instead of ignoring and hoping that the reviewer won't see it, if you have a reason not to be inclusive, say there is a limitation of budget and you can only reach highly educated people to start the pilot and then you'll apply for further funding for engagement, say so, and then you address it with the reviewers. And importantly, lack of contacts with existing network. So, for example, doing something where there is a lot of activity in the area, and then people will ask, but there are really good projects in, say, Germany or France or other places. Why aren't you learning from them? So it's always worth checking that in your area, which network you can connect with. There are a few other proposals here about how to tell the story, how to do the writing. I don't want to cover all these things, but the most important point about it is to remember that you need to consider it as a science communication exercise. And if you are working with the public, you probably can explain your ideas to non-experts. Write your proposal as if you are writing it to non-expert, and then they'll have disciplinary knowledge, the reviewers, but they won't have expert in your niche, and therefore you can think about writing for the criteria, but in a way that explain it to the reader. So those are kind of really quick tips on how to consider your proposal writing, and especially stopping a little bit about the problems of citizen science and participatory science. Any question before we take a break? No? Okay, I hope that you do get value from this meeting. I know we are giving you a lot of information. So if you come back from the break and have questions, we will dedicate time to that then.
Okay. So we have 10 minutes?
Yeah, we will
About
do
10
about 10
minutes.
minutes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
See you in 10 minutes. Okay. Thank you.
So thank you all. I also hope if there's any question, I can then reply in writing through any email that I left on the slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. If there will be some,
I also,
questions,
just to be sure, drop my email in the chat. So,
please do.
and
Hello, I think we can resume.
So first of all, Diana asked a question in the chat. Thank you, about my presentation, which indeed I ran through it quite quickly. So the constructive ambiguity concept is actually really important in proposal, and it's something that you need to be precise, but you need to be careful about how precise you are, especially when we're talking about citizen science and processes like that. And the reason for that is that you need to keep yourself the option that things will change in the proposal, and especially in European proposal, the text that you are writing is becoming automatically the grant agreement. So if you want to change things, you might need to go even to a process of changing the grant, which is complex and cumbersome and difficult and all the rest of it. So the way to do that is, for example, you use for example. So instead of saying, like I described, that you are describing a process in a lot of detail, and then you're saying, this can be used, for example, for implementing something, and that gives the reviewers a concrete idea about it, or to say it will be addressed issue 1, 2, or 3, and that open up for you the possibility of what it is. So to know how to do it without opening it too far is something that you develop a skill about, and it's a writing skill. But it's something to consider. So that's one thing. The reverse pyramid is actually really important one in research proposal. It's a technique that actually every journalist learn in practically their first day or something like that. And you see it in if you ever came across any news website. And that's something that we are not used to write as scientists. So as scientists, you kind of build the case, and then you reach the conclusion. Now, when you're writing research proposal, actually you want in the first sentence that the reader, or if we're talking about a bigger proposal, that within the first paragraph, the reader knows what this research proposal is about. Then you give a bit more detail in the second part, and then you give all the detail. And that's technique is called in writing reverse pyramid. Again, look at it up in journalism. And it's a very effective technique. And you can think about it as you write your abstract and as you write the introduction to the proposal. It's a generic on research proposal, because otherwise what you're expecting the reviewer is to build all the knowledge, and by the time they got into the place where you have your research question and research objective, they might miss it. So that's why it's good to kind of even repeat several times for the reviewer what will be the place, what will be the material that they would look at and how they would do. So that's those are the two concepts that were suggested. So now our next talk is from Franzi, who will introduce us to EXA and to the way that you can join in. We mentioned in the previous session already the option of affiliated entities and other things like that, but you'll hear much more because EXA got now wonderful experience in joining and being involved in research proposals. So Franzi, you can share your screen, you should be able, and or not if you are just talking.
I'm trying.
Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. So I'm Franziska, or Franzi, as you prefer, or can pronounce. I'm a project officer and scientific coordinator at EXA since 3 years, the European Citizen Science Association. And I'm going to give a mixture of a bit of introduction on EXA, but also on the pillar 2 of the Horizon Europe, that actually a lot, or the big chunk of the projects that EXA is involved in actually belong to. You see presenter mode, don't you?
No, we're seeing the slides.
Okay, perfect. So what is EXA? EXA is basically a European umbrella institution for citizen science in Europe. We don't have so many on-the-ground projects, but we're more the meta level of citizen science. We support the community with many different things: advocacy, methodology development, events, communications, many different services that EXA offers. Of course, also research on citizen science. We currently have 21 team members in the headquarters that are in Berlin. EXA is a member-based association. We have more than 200 members, individual, organizational, across 40 countries, so also some beyond Europe. EXA hosts the European Citizen Science Platform, which is was developed within the EU Citizen Science Project. And that is a database and also an index of European citizen science projects, resources, trainings. It also hosts the ECS Academy projects and also the national level networks of citizen science. And EXA has also working groups. I will come to that in a little bit. So as Muki already said in an earlier talk, EXA was officially founded or came into action in 2014. So we have more than 10 years of European citizen science experience. And EXA also itself provides best practice resources, such as the 10 principles of citizen science that were then later also refined with the 10 characteristics of citizen science. You can find this just by Googling it or by looking on the platform. So I already introduced the platform. We also have a citizen science discussion game. And I think Muki also had, or someone had it on a slide previously, we also recently, in collaboration with our strategy and policy working group, as well as the ECS project, we published a position paper in support of citizen science in Europe, also in the light of the framework programs being designed right now to have citizen science integrated as a solid element. You can endorse and download the paper under this link here. We would very much like that. EXA currently has 21 projects, is always one finishing, one ending, with over 370 partners, actually European and beyond, in 30 countries. I will give a little bit more detail later on this. But I'm actually gonna now jump to the Pillar 2 or the Horizon Europe. So this was also in some of the previous slides. The Horizon Europe is the 9th framework program, basically, of the European Union. So there was 8 programs before until 2020. Horizon Europe runs from 21 to 27 and had a total budget, or has a total budget of 96 billion euros, which was a 30% increase from Horizon 2020. This year, they have seen a lot more applications in all the calls. Some calls have even received 80% increase, really depending on the topics, which is probably due to a combination of factors, other funding sources being more scarce, the situation in the US, generative AI supporting maybe also in proposal writing. So the success rates are actually going down for the moment, but not to discourage. It is the way it is. And what is Pillar 2? So within Horizon Europe, Pillar 1, you were already introduced to Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions. You have also the individual actions of the ERC, funding individual research in the program, as well as the research infrastructures in Pillar 1. And then Pillar 2 as the global challenges and European industrial competitiveness as the hat, and is basically structured into clusters that then release individual calls, and those clusters are health. You can read them here. I won't go into detail. The slides are available to you in, I think, after the session, so you can just look at that. Pillar 2 also in the last framework program, it also had the missions, which is under particular topics. The EU clustered the European projects in missions to increase synergy between the project communication and impact of those projects. For instance, EXA has projects in the soil health and food mission, in the adaptation to climate change, and in the mission ocean, and actually works super well because they're really trying to make the projects longer term. One project is finishing to really also use previous project outputs. So as Muki was saying, please always check in a cluster or in a mission, check other projects, what they're doing, not to reinvent the wheel when you write applications. This is super important. So Pillar 2, the aim was to tackle major global challenges, to address the sustainable development goals, and also promote European industrial competitiveness. It is a rather top-down approach for this pillar, in the sense that the Commission was looking for specific projects to address specific topics, and some were really extremely specific. The calls were so specific, it was literally a tick list of all the things you had to do. This was also received as a feedback by the Commission from the researchers. And the collaborative research projects, so they include often many partners, and the proposals need to answer a range of expected academic, societal, economic impacts, and the consortium needs to reflect the relevant expertise and demonstrate that they can do this. The proposal outline tended to be quite strict. There's a strict form, there's many rules for the proposals. And the type of research actions that are funded under Pillar 2 are research and innovation actions, so RIAs. You have to have at least 3 beneficiaries from 3 different European countries there, and they should aim to have established new knowledge or explore new improved technology, products, process, services, etc., with 100% funding rate of the eligible costs of the projects. I've put here some examples of projects that EXA is currently running from RIAs. Then you have innovation actions that produce plans or designs for new or improved products, processes, or services with up to 100% funding rate for academic or non-legal entities, or up to 70 for profit-making entities. And then you have the coordination and support actions. EXA does a lot of those, and they don't do research as a primary goal, but they facilitate cooperation between EU and/or associated countries to strengthen standardization in a particular topic, dissemination, networking, communication, awareness raising, policy, etc., or the mutual learning exercise, for example, with a funding rate of up to 100%. And increasingly in the calls for under this pillar, you have actually citizen science written into the calls, as in it is encouraged or can be used. And we've also seen now in the last round of calls that indeed EXA was specifically mentioned. Colombe also said probably in future calls this is going to be the place. So EXA is a really good way to actually also network for these calls, engage with us, and look at these calls. So here are the current EXA projects, ECS as one of the central strategic projects for EXA, and then we have projects in many different areas of expertise. As I said, many support and coordination actions. You can all find this on the EXA website. You can also ask me after the talk or in person if you're interested in anything in particular. And practical tips how to find the calls is via the European Commission's funding and tender opportunities portal. They have a specific search function that takes 30 seconds to learn. And then where can you find partners if you wish to engage in European projects? Well, coming from EXA, I have to say, really, the EXA network is a fantastic opportunity. We have 200, like I said, 200 members and way more partners in all the different projects that we have many requests. Not a day goes by where I don't get an email, oh, do you know someone in this field I'm looking for? We're always happy to connect partners or saying, oh, this partner has expertise in, or please talk to this person. This is also one of our main functions. And we have really fantastic working groups. I'll show them in a slide in a second. There's also there's the Cordis portal from the European Union. You have partner calls there. Some institutions go there. And then you have a commercial offer, the Crowd Helix platform, which a lot of partners I know are using. There's many more that you can find, but these are the ones that the majority of people that I talk to have used or are used. And this was also mentioned before, very important if you're thinking about going for proposals or calls, the national contact points are super important. So I linked the search site here from the EU. Look at your nearest national contact point. Most of them are also happy to give feedback on proposals once you've written them. And say you didn't address the impact very well or something. We've had very good feedback sometimes from national contact points when we've sent them proposals. The draft work programs for 26 and 27, if you're interested to check what's out there, you can find them on this website. And then these are the EXA working groups. So we have in many different topics, for instance, air quality, biodiversity monitoring, aquatic ecosystems, agri-food, impact assessment. The working groups are really a fantastic place to meet people, gather momentum. They do very different things. They organize events. They write position papers. They sometimes also write papers together. They do reviews. They gather data. They develop best practices or resources. All the working groups function independently, all put their own focus points on what they would like to do. And it's a really great environment to also get to know other people in the citizen science world. And many a proposal has found partners in the working groups. You don't have to be an EXA member to join a working group. Initially, you can just look on our website. You can email either one of us or the chair of the working group when the next meeting is happening to join one of the working groups in an area that interests you. And so jumping back, sorry, to pillar 2. So what happens is now in the second funding period, basically the work program for 25 to 27. What's going to change? So there's going to be less prescriptive and shorter than previous topic descriptions and calls, basically. They have published that there's going to be a 35% reduction in the number of topics comparison to the previous work program. They're going to have more broader topics that each fund more projects. Before you had very narrowly defined topics that were sometimes only funding one project. So now it's going to be broader, and each topic is going to be open for more projects. This is to have basically increase impact and get away from this narrow system. And they're also going to change the submission system. They're going to increase the 2-stage calls for the next work program. So before now, in the last round, many proposals, you had to hand in your 45 pages or whatever, and now it's going to go to 2-stage calls. You're going to hand in 10 pages of a summary of your proposed research project. Then it's for the reviewers, it's also easier to get rid of the ones that probably won't make it. And this first round is also, you don't have to write the 45 pages as a consortium, but you go for the 10-pager. And then in the second stage, you submit the full proposal if you pass the first one. And they're going to have 41 calls with this 2-stage evaluation in the next 2 years, at least what you read on EU News. If anybody has different information, please correct me. And the plan is also now to increasingly evaluate them blindly, so you don't look at the partners or the consortia that are handing them in, to make it more fair. Then very, very briefly, I think I'm running out of time. I am indeed. So on the widening participation part, so this the EU has this compound indicator that for research excellence. They basically, many indicators feed into this, and they make this measure of what is excellence in a country in terms of research. And basically, they come up with this threshold of 70% of the EU 28 average is the threshold value. And if you don't reach the 70%, you are classified as a widening country. This is, I understand it, how the widening countries came. So basically, they came up with this widening participation and spreading excellence, part of Horizon Europe, where they have different instruments to fund either institutions, networks, collaborations, or individual people to increase competitiveness and excellence in research. And their main instruments is teaming for excellence, twinning, and ERA chairs. So they either is upgrading centers for excellence. It's twinning, for example, research institutions that act as coordinators in a widening and a non-widening country for transfer of knowledge or best practice exchange. Or ERA chairs, which is attracting high-level people to institutions in the widening countries. And then also they have some money for research or some people in the groups, for example. Really, the slides will be available. You don't have to memorize or whatever, it's all there. And I'm happy to answer questions also at any time. And then you have other instruments. I won't go into detail because of time. You have the European Excellence Initiative. You have Pathways to Synergies, which is, for example, trying to provide support if you have funding systems in widening countries that are not yet compatible with European system. It's a way to align the two and then in the future have more compatible funding ways. The support dissemination exploitation. Interesting maybe for the audience here would be the hop-on facility. If you don't have experience with Horizon Europe yet, it allows basically institutions from widening countries to join already ongoing research and innovation actions in Pillar 2 and the EIC Pathfinder. ERA Talents is also for direct career support. And then you have the cost actions, which is, there's a call, they fund a lot of projects, which basically enables researchers to build research networks on a particular topic. And then all widening countries, so of course also Romania, they qualify as coordinators. This is important, I think, to know. And then I've also here put a link for the draft work program of the widening participation of the wide ERA calls for 25 to 27. Again, I think Colin mentioned the date when this will be finalized and published, but you can already check here all the calls, how many projects will be funded, and what's the budget per topic, basically. And with that, I finish. I've put here, you can find it on the slides, my email and also the email of our fundraising officer. If you have technical questions about funding or you would like to join or find a partner or something, you can always email one of us, or if you are interested in a working group, etc. And yeah, any questions, comments, corrections, feedback?
And pointing out that for your organization or institution to join EXA, it's not expensive. It's really still very, very affordable way to join and be part of those networks, and then to do that. And we've done that with consideration of the of the different places in Europe and the different abilities of organization and individual to join in.
Thank you, Muki. I was going to say that indeed we have a special deal. I don't like the word, but we have a special offer for the moment on for institutions from the widening countries. They receive a discount basically on EXA membership, I think, until after the conference next year, the EXA conference 2026 in Ulo.
Yeah.
Yeah,
please
and
join us.
about that,
Lukrina.
yes, and about that, I was going to announce that our university is covering 20 EXA memberships, but only for the employees of Babet Boyer University. I know some people in the list have already registered. So we are trying to help our researchers and our university staff to become member, and we took advantage of this widening offer. Yeah. So I encourage everybody to become member. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Yes.
Yeah, you can either, yeah, Vanzi will put in the email address. Yeah. Okay. And you join in, you become part of groups, you can create different opportunities. The conference a lot of time is also opportunities for discussion, etc.
Yes. I will put the link for the conference as well. This is a super nice conference. It's really fun, but it also had a lot of high quality research and a lot of diversity. The last EXA conference, it will be the same again. It's in Ulu. You can see the Northern Lights in March, hopefully. And yes, we invite everybody to still join. The call for abstracts, unfortunately, is already closed. Diana, you received no answer. I will double check, but this is the email address to send to. If not, you can also always reach out to me or to Kaiti if you have specific questions.
Okay, brilliant. So now the experience of an organization joining in proposal. So Luis, over to you. Luis Francis, the director of Change. Hi, great seeing you.
You too. Let me just share my screen. Share screen.
It's the present. No, it's the, yeah, can see it now. It's the full screen.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
Okay, no probs. Yeah, well, hi everybody, and thank you for having me here today. So I'm just going to kind of introduce who we are as an organization. And I think you've heard a lot about, obviously, the kind of funding programs and thinking about how to access them. So I'm not going to give you any of that. I'm just really going to give you the experience of our involvement as an organization in a Horizon project, and just kind of give you a little bit of a background and our experience, and also the kind of the results of that particular project. So we're a social enterprise mapping for change, which is part owned by University College London, and Muki is also one of the co-founders and co-directors. And then as an organization, we're really kind of focusing on deploying participatory approaches through using maps, geographical information, geospatial technologies, and citizen science as a methodological approach to really build more sustainable and resilient communities, and particularly focused on working with marginalized communities who are often not involved in these types of activities. And I'm not trying to preach to, those who are already in the know, but I mean, I think working with a consortium is like when I say starting a relationship. So you're working with them for 3 years or 4 years, and you'll have your ups and downs. But it is really about how we can all kind of start from working on the same page. And that's, for me, in our experience over the last 17 years, is what kind of builds for a successful project. So I thought that's always kind of good to point out, is who you're pulling together to work with. So I just wanted to share with you one of the projects that we've worked on, and that's the D-Noses project. This was an innovative kind of bottom-up based project inside citizen science to improve environmental odor management, which is a kind of area which I guess has been not looked at so much, particularly when it comes to citizen science. And it was funded under the SWOFS program and ran from 2018 to 21. And just in terms of evaluation, we scored a 15 out of 15, which is quite unusual, so we're quite happy with that. We had 14 partners and we operated across 9 different countries. And Principle 10 was really key for the implementation of this project. And that was because we wanted to ensure that there was public participation, but also access to environmental information and access to justice in relation to environmental matters. But the 5 main objectives were really about raising awareness in relation to odor issues through a multi-level engagement strategy, but at various levels. So both at the local level, but also thinking about this at a kind of global level. And also to provide access to information on odor by creating an odor observatory and collecting evidence through 10 local case studies, which spanned across Europe, but also we had Sub-Saharan Africa and Uganda, and also Chile. And what we really wanted to do is thinking about a way in which to standardize a methodology and impact criteria to provide common scientific guidelines for policy making, and also produce a green paper on a kind of roadmap in terms of governance in odor pollution. So just those of you who are not familiar, odor pollution impacts people in many different ways. Yes, it's a nuisance, but also in terms of our health and well-being. And this can range from inducing headaches, lack of concentration, stress, and also respiratory problems. And quite frequently, when people are experiencing odor issues, it's an alert of other kind of potential or health or sanitary problems. And they're definitely an indicator of environmental issues. So the traditional kind of odor pollution regulation framework is that traditional odor management deploys kind of 2 techniques. So there's sampling and dispersion modeling, which really only gives an idea of the area of impact. And then there's field observations where people go out and look at the kind of frequency of nuisance people are being exposed to. And this is carried out by private consultants, industry, or local authorities. So it's a very top-down way of which it's traditionally managed. And it's also very costly. And one of the issues here is that there's no transparency or communication with those kind of approaches and methodologies. And there's also no access for the public with regards to that environmental information. So as a result, citizens are kind of powerless due to the lack of legislation. And legislation is actually really heterogeneous across regions in terms of the regulatory framework. So there's no coherence. And this creates a generation of social environmental problems in the conflicted communities where there's poor quality of life and ultimately sustainability is reduced. So what we wanted to do was to change the paradigm and see, can we simplify the odor monitoring and use what has been given to most of us, which is our noses and a sense of smell, although I appreciate that not everybody has a sense of smell. My mum is one of those. So but also, can we use a bottom-up approach instead of just a top-down approach to considering the real perception of odors to better understand the problem? And really trying to think about changing this concept of complaint, which is, I guess, frequently perceived by industries and local authorities in terms of odor management, to real-time odor observations. Previously, odor measurement in the field was very complicated and, as I said, costly task. So we really wanted to see, can we change this? How can citizen science help? So I'm sure a lot of you will be aware that, you know, citizen sensors as a concept has been enabled and facilitated by smartphones, the Internet of Things, big data, and obviously the open source movement and open data and crowdsourcing. And it also enables us to kind of raise awareness about environmental issues. So the advantages in relation to looking at odor specifically is that humans have their noses and we're very good sensors to measure odors. And there's also a clear motivation for engagement where communities are being blighted by odor pollution in their particular localities. So what we did is we designed an engagement model. I'm not going to go through all of the steps of the engagement model, but really step one is looking at, are there odor issues in a particular community, right the way through to thinking about how do we co-design approaches and data analysis to really thinking about developing solutions to try and address the issue, and then looking at what actions can be taken. Now, to support this engagement process and also thinking about data collection and also providing access to information, we developed a few tools to support this. So community maps is one of the tools that we used, which is a bespoke interactive map to look at mapping existing odor regulations in different parts of the world to provide a source of information to people who may not be privy to that, but also another map to actually enable communities to map where they're being affected by odor. The Odor Collect app was also designed to enable this data collection and deployment by communities anywhere across the world. So these are two kind of key applications, although we also designed other approaches, both paper-based, on the understanding that not everybody has access to technology. So just to kind of step through our approach to engagement and really trying to identify some local case studies for this particular project. And the objectives here were first to identify communities being affected by odors and identify the different stakeholders, because we were really adamant that we wanted to engage the quadruple helix stakeholders. So that's from local governments, citizens and NGOs, academia, but also industry. And industry generally, or quite often, are the source of odor pollution in particular localities. So for us, it was really important to have them on board in this particular process. And then also looking at defining a framework to engage these stakeholders and the communities being affected to deploy citizen science interventions. So I'm going to kind of focus on the UK case in this instance rather than going across all of them. So we started by doing a desk-based research to understand where communities are, where there's reports of communities being affected odor pollution communities who and this resulted in more than 50 odor issues being mapped across the UK. And we are also receiving inquiries, for example, a community in the Royal Docks around London City Airport got in contact. So as a result, we started to kind of have some exploratory meetings with potential stakeholders. So in that case, it was Thames Water, and we introduced the project. So we had two potential UK pilots, Penrith in Cumbria and the Royal Docks around London City Airport. So the Penrith pilot, the community was being affected by an animal rendering plant and lorries transporting dead animals. And it's also an area where there's two national parks in close proximity. So also the community was also concerned that this might deter tourists wanting to visit the area. And then in the case of the Royal Docks around London City Airport, residents and workers were worried about the smell of jet fuel, believing that the airlines were actually dumping this fuel prior to landing. And the extent could potentially be masked by, there's a local sewage works and recycling centre also emitting odour in the areas. So we thought, okay, let's try and focus on these two particular case studies. Why? One, because of the potential for replicability. Two, because of the potential for scalability, and second, in terms of looking at the potential for reach in terms of communities being impacted. Because in terms of the London City Airport, the owners own several airports in different cities. And in terms of the rendering plant, they also owned 2 other plants in the UK. So it meant that if we were able to deploy this successfully, there was a potential for scaling up in this particular case. However, the opportunity doesn't always equal take up. So despite being contacted by residents around London City Airport, and having meetings with 1 or 2 of the stakeholders there, we set up our first community workshop, and the 2 people sitting there are our staff members, and with fruit and other niceties, but it was a no-show. So we had to kind of go back to the drawing board rather than trying to pursue a particular case where there just wasn't take up. And that led us to a community in Southall and Hayes. So the question here was, can co-creation and citizen science allow us to develop a better understanding of the extent and source of odor and the potential area of impact in this particular community? So just a bit of a background in terms of this particular area. These are 2 neighboring areas of high deprivation. They're controlled by 2 different municipalities. It has the largest Punjabi community outside of the Indian subcontinent. It's an area of high industrial activity and immigration due to the strong rail and canal and air connections historically. And there are also different industrial sites that fall within the remit of 2 local councils, Ealing Council and Hillingdon. So just in terms of the historical background, these are just some snapshots from some press releases and kind of residents really complaining about the issue in the area. So you can see here from the headlines, this place is making my life hell. And residents also preparing a court challenge over the redevelopment of a local gasworks site. So historically, there were also some other industries in the area. Nestles, the coffee factory. Now, there were smells coming from there, but if you like coffee, that actually might be a nice odor. And it also could potentially mask some of the other odors that were coming from some of the other industries. But Nestle's coffee factory shut down. And in the area, there were also other plants, ashvale plants, both to the northeast and 1 to the southwest, 2 to the southwest. But a lot of the complaints were being generated by the local gasworks, which had previously had a whole remediation process, and it was now under a kind of whole housing redevelopment. But alongside those, there were other potential sources that were identified. So under the Air Quality Act, steam engines were not allowed into London. So they're stabled in the Southall area, so that the diesel engine stables are actually there. And also Heathrow Airport lies to the east, and there are a number of food industries and oil recycling companies. So there was not just one potential source with regards to the pollution, but the community were definitely being impacted. So here you can see in the image to the top right-hand corner there is the former gasworks site, which was under redevelopment. And there in the bottom, you can see the asphalt plant. And this map is just showing you actually a number of potential odor sources within the community in question. So the challenge here, one of the challenges was the pilot started during lockdown. So we kind of initiated a whole social media drive and lots of virtual meetings and also old-fashioned email to really try to frame the problem and understand what was going on, and also map out all of the various stakeholders involved and bring them around to actually see, okay, how can we look to deploy a kind of citizen science approach to look at what's happening in the area. So we encourage the community to go out and, using the Odor Collect app, monitor and take recordings over a 14-month period. and a total of 480 observations were made over this period. And they were also able to kind of provide descriptions and also the potential source, even if unknown. We had 43 residents that were engaged, with 14 that were much more active in their reporting behaviour. We also looked at kind of demographics of who was reporting and potentially being impacted by the odour observations that were being made. And you can just see the breakdown of these here, both in terms of gender and age profile. So then we looked at actually, okay, what's the data telling us? So here you can see this is the frequency of odours being reported in terms of the type. And by far, industry was being reported far more than any of the other kind of types of odour in the area. And then we broke this down by subtype. So in the industrial reports, what type of industrial odours are you perceiving? And these range from asphalt and rubber to chemicals and also petrochemicals. So not only looking at the type, we also wanted to see how people were perceiving these odours, whether they were deemed pleasant or unpleasant. And you can see they range from moderately unpleasant to extremely unpleasant for the majority. However, we did see, just from the data, that there were 2 users that generated 39 false positives. So although they tagged them as extremely pleasant, you can see from the descriptions that they provided, and this ability to actually provide descriptions also helped us kind of get more qualitative input in relation to what people were perceiving when they were taking their recordings. So here you can see comment, I just opened my window and it's a very bad odor, although they've tagged it as extremely pleasant. Another is saying it's so unfair, can't open my windows, feeling dizzy, but they've marked it. So we tried to extract the data where we were getting these false positives to really give us a more comprehensive breakdown. And then we looked at the frequency of odours recorded between a certain period of time. We brought this down, we could see here that there were specific days where odours were being reported more than others. And just to note, if I go back here, you can see here this brown dot. We also encouraged people to report when there were no odours. So it wasn't kind of going out only recording. We really tried to encourage people to systematically at least make 1, 2, 3 reports a day, even if they do not perceive an odour at that time. And you can see the collection in the bottom left-hand corner here. There are a number of kind of reports that say that there are no odours. So it wasn't just that people were going out only when odours were being detected. So we broke this down both in terms of the time, days that they were being recorded, and also looking at some of the qualitative reports that were being gathered on those particular days. And this data was shared and liaised with both the industries and also the communities and also the local authorities. And by kind of this data sharing approach that we adopted on a regular basis, the industries identified that, okay, the peak that was shown here on this particular day was actually when they were laying a new access road in the housing development. Similarly, we looked at different days of the week. And here it's clear you can see that at the weekend, far less odours being reported. However, the demographic in this community is not like they have second homes. So people were far more likely to be at home during these periods, but yet still weren't reporting more odours during the weekend. The asphalt plants was least active on a Sunday, and you can see actually Sunday, there's the least number of reports. So the data, again, with this data sharing and liaising with the industries, they confirmed that this weekly pattern actually makes sense, because quite often I think with citizen science and using the data generated by citizen science is this issue of, can we trust the data? But actually by sharing and kind of collaborating collectively, the patterns that were being observed also met with the activities that were going on by several of the industries in the area. And when we looked at this hourly hourly kind of pattern, another kind of, let's say, validation in terms of the data that was being collected was made, so that the industry confirmed that the weekly patterns made sense based on the general asphalt plant operations, and also the hourly kind of pattern also made sense because they wound down their activities between 1 and 4 p.m. And actually that's where we were seeing a drop in the number of observations being made. We were able to get that because the industry in that case was very open to sharing the data. However, the housing development, I guess there was a lot more contention around that, and there was less open data available on housing development operations. So we were not able to kind of do that comparison as we were with the asphalt plant. So just to kind of summarize and look at, okay, so what? We've collected the data, the community have got involved, we have the ear of the various stakeholders that we engaged throughout the process. So the next steps were, we were able actually to get the local MP involved, and she wrote a letter to the lead of the municipality, stating the fact that, you know, members of the public have raised concerns and have been doing over the last 14 years in relation to odor complaints. And one of the issues particularly was that the telephone system in terms of actually making reports to the local authority was very cumbersome, and people found that they were on the phone waiting for a long period of time and ultimately quite often just hung up. But it was also a bit of a black box because nobody else knew what reports were being made and when they were being made or if they'd been made. So she really decided to support the campaign that we'd initiated with one of the local campaign groups and the community and some of the other actors, and employed the lead of the council to actually promote the use of the mobile app to enable residents to provide another way in which residents could actually report and share particular odor observations alongside the traditional methods that they had already or were used to using. So that not only could it save time and officers' time, but it also creates a comprehensive picture of the odor nuisances in the area. So the lead of the council actually...
Can we finish?
Yeah, sorry, I'm not seeing my screen. Okay. So the outcome finally was that they appointed a new environmental officer. They used the mobile app and basically generated a whole new protocol in terms to environmental reporting within the municipality. And that was it. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm screwed up. All right.
No, great. Thank you. So you can see the movement from idea, from a project into real impact on policy when you're identifying the opportunities. And actually, it's also a great example of those case studies that Colombe has mentioned earlier. Yeah? Great. If there is questions, I want to ensure that we have time for Gefion to give us a talk. Gefion, you should be able now to share. I think I made you already a co-presenter.
Yeah, I shall try. I need to say up front that I'm A, on a hotel network, and B, only on my laptop. So as soon as I start sharing, I won't be able to see anyone. So
if there is anything, I will shout.
Thank you. All right, let me try the ominous screen share. Hopefully you can see this. Yes?
Not yet.
Saying that it started screen sharing, so I'm waiting for it to appear. Yes, it's appearing.
All right, fantastic. Cool. So I've only heard 1.5 of the previous talks, so stop me if I repeat anything that has already been said by other people. But what I wanted to talk about is the Impetus project and the way that we have funded and supported just under 130 citizen science projects over the last 3.5 years. So just to give you a very brief if I can change the slides, a very brief overview of what Impetus is. It is a Horizon project as a coordination and support action. And the whole purpose of the project is to support and recognize the achievements of citizen science across Europe by bringing it closer to society, making sure it has impact on policy, and also feeds into the European Green Deal and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We did all of that alongside 3 key principles, which were participation. We wanted all of our projects and our own process to be as participatory as possible. Equity, diversity, and inclusion. Everything that we did was meant to be for as many people as possible, as inclusive, as diverse as possible. And also impact. We wanted everything that we did to really have impact in the respective areas where it was intended, and to support that happening for the projects that joined us. We had 4 overarching goals: making funding accessible for citizen science initiatives, bringing citizen science closer to society, enabling them to make those policy contributions, and also run an annual award, the European Union Prize for Citizen Science. We've done all of that, and I want to tell you a little bit about how we've done that, how we've selected our projects, and also what we've then done for them and how that kind of model could work elsewhere. The heart of Impetus is really the Impetus Accelerator. That's accelerators you might be familiar with from other concepts like startups or business. And what we've done really over the last couple of years with Impetus, and even before that, is to take that concept from business acceleration and apply it to citizen science. So we have run a bunch of open calls. Unfortunately, the last one has already closed, so you cannot apply for these specific funds anymore. But things like it are run by Horizon Europe projects fairly regularly. So people applied. When they were successful, they joined us for a 7-month project that we helped them implement. And they received either 20,000 or 10,000 projects, depending on where they were in their citizen science journey. Every single one got a mentor assigned that basically held their hand and supported them through the whole process. They received extensive training and support, depending on what they needed. There was a range of trainings on offer, and I'll go into more detail on that in a moment. And also regularly met not only with their mentor, but also with the other projects. So the cohorts were somewhere between 35 and 48, I think, was the largest project. So there was also a lot of synergy, because these were all projects that had applied for the same thing. They went through the same process. They worked on similar topics. So there was a lot of synergies between them, and they made good use of that. The initiatives that we selected were really very, very broad. So we were intentionally broad because we wanted to support as many and as diverse projects as possible, as I said. So they came from environmental science, social science, digital humanities, the arts, some of them. They all incorporated the characteristics of citizen science as defined by EXA, which I'm assuming you've already heard about. They focused on science and research with citizens, so really participatory, ideally led by citizens, but that was not the case for all of them. Some of them did education, others did more specific research engagement. What was important to us is that it wasn't just using citizens for data collection. So a lot of these were really very inclusive, defined the research questions with the projects, defined the whole setup, the entire methodology, engaged the citizens also in policymaking efforts, etc. So it was really, really broad. Now, what they got from joining us was the 7-month project. They got the funding, but actually what was more important than that was really the support and the whole package. So this is what we told projects when they applied with us, is to consider how Impetus can benefit them, not just in terms of giving them money, but really in terms of supporting the project as a whole and making use of all of these training and support efforts and the peer learning and the networking and everything else that we did. Now, when they did join us, they also had a bunch of things to do. first off, they had to actually implement that 7-month project, and they would only get the full funding if they actually hit their goals, if they made a plan, set KPIs, and set themselves up for success, and then really achieve that as well. They also had an obligation to attend the training and the meetings and the calls with their mentors. So if they didn't communicate, that was a problem, because we were there not just to give them money, we were there to really support them, and we can't do that if we don't know what's going on, if we don't know what's happening. So there was a real effort to have a lot of communication and a lot of exchange so that support could be provided. Especially when projects were struggling. So there was, even if there were problems, it's all the more important to talk to us and to have that engagement, because then we can help work through those. That's what the accelerator is for. And then because it is part of a Horizon Europe funding, and everything that is funded by the European Commission needs to acknowledge that that is the case. So likewise, projects that were funded by Impetus, which was funded by the European Commission, also needed to acknowledge that funding and had some representative obligations as well. And in the end, write a formal report, which is much less cumbersome than it sounds, conduct some impact assessment, provide some outputs like an article, a video, maybe a policy brief, depending on what the projects had planned, and then attend a final meeting. So that was the whole package of obligations. The topics that we ran were different every year. So we ran 3 open calls with a total of 7 challenges. The first 2 in 2023 were about citizen science for a healthy planet and for urban environments, so cities for life. Last year, we ran 3 challenges, one for sustainable lifestyles, focused on the Sustainable Development Goals, one for justice and equity, and one for bottom-up citizen science projects. The last one that we ran this year focused on circular communities and citizen science for a fair and just society. All of these then had like at least 2 or 3 sub-challenges, so different specific topics. And any projects that fit within either of the challenges or sub-challenges could apply for our calls. So we tried to be as broad as possible, while also allowing us to be able to actually review the projects that came in. Because the broader the topic, the harder it is to find the experts to actually give feedback on the applications. So half of these challenges, so every other one, was also selected by a citizen panel that we had recruited. So we ran not just topics that we thought were useful, so the sustainable development topics came from the Impetus Consortium, but the others came from a panel of citizen science practitioners that thought about what are the topics that are important for them, that are important in their respective areas, and challenge around that. So the justice and equity, the urban challenges, the fair and just society, those really came from practicing citizen scientists to say these are really areas where we would like to see more citizen science. In terms of eligibility, just briefly running through this, but it is important. Basically, anyone could apply, whether they're an individual, a legal entity, or a consortium. You didn't need a consortium. You could just apply as a single person if that was justified by the project setup, or you could apply with multiple institutions joining up together to run a project. They needed to be located and delivered in the European research area, so not just the European Union, not just the core countries, but really the extended research area. There were some regulations about how old the project was, depending on which grant they wanted to apply for, so whether it's the 10,000 or the 20,000. The 20,000 were for newer projects who were only getting started. The lower amount was for projects who were already up and running and wanted to continue. And then they filled out an application form, a budget, and submitted all of that. It was only 4 pages, so the whole purpose was to keep this as simple as possible. In their project plan that they had to submit, they provided an idea of the budget and the implementation, so how they were going to do this, who was going to deliver it, so who's the team, and also crucially, who's the community, who are the citizens that will actually engage in this, and lastly, what impact is that likely to have, or is that intended to have. We reviewed all of these applications, first looking at eligibility criteria, like are these people actually able to get funding? Then the ones that got reviewed by 2 to 3 expert reviewers in citizen science and the respective scientific fields that they were applying in. Out of those, we then selected about 90 in each call that we interviewed, and after the interviews, we then made funding decisions. And all of these details, the entire process, all of the things they needed to do were all listed in a very detailed, everyone could download before they applied. I left this slide in for your reference. We don't need to go through all of the different formalities, but just to say that there was a whole list of formalities that needed to be followed. And that was part of our eligibility assessment, because we needed to make sure that everyone was playing by the same rules. So for example, what we had seen in previous calls is that we specified you need to use this application form, and then people used the form and they kept it to 4 pages, but they reduced the font size to 7. So they had significantly more space and more words to apply than others. So that is why things like the font size and the spacing is all defined so that everyone really applies under the same circumstances and nobody is trying to trick us, basically. In terms of budgets, those could be spent on anything that was relevant for the project, really. The primary thing was salaries, so actually paying project staff to run the projects, but also equipment, travel costs if the project was run in multiple locations, or if travel was necessary for other reasons, but also things like subcontracting or buying consumables, whatever was really necessary to make the project successful. So from that, this is how you apply. And then when you get in, this is what you get. We kick the whole thing off. So once you join, the first thing that happens is you get invited to a boot camp. This is really an intense 1 or 2 week, depending, like about 20 hours. And sometimes we did that in 1 week, and sometimes we split it across 2. Program that runs through everything you need to know about running a citizen science project. And it covers things like equity, diversity, and inclusion, impact, policy, data and ethics for citizen science, communication, how you actually engage citizens, and then how you take all of that and put it into a work plan for a project that you can actually deliver. Apologies. So this was set up so that we could be sure that all of our projects actually knew what they were doing, and they had a common ground established upon which they could build. So this was also the first time when all of the projects met each other and joined up and started to work together and started to figure out some of those collaborations that in some cases have led to them building businesses together. And then over the course of the accelerator, there was a set of trainings, some of which were mandatory. Each lasted about 2 hours, and they were focused on impact, on communication, data and ethics, and data publication as well, impact assessment, and financial sustainability. So how do you take a project and actually make it sustainable over time, if that is what you want to do? And then for us particularly eager projects, we added a bonus to writing a policy brief, because so many of our projects are really focused on having impact on policy and creating those outputs that are useful for policymakers. And then in terms of training and mentoring, or mentoring and the networking sessions, all of the mentors came from different backgrounds related to citizen science. And what we tried to do is for each and every one of them, so every one of our 130 projects got a mentor that had relevant expertise to what they needed. So if they were running a project in the democracy space, we were trying to find an expert in that field. If they were running something in biodiversity, we tried to find someone who either did that or had relevant tangential expertise. Clearly, there's so many different topics, we can't provide the exact expertise for every single one, but we tried to do our best so that they could really provide the kind of support that the project was likely to need. And the aperitifs, those are those networking meetings. There were at least 2 in every cohort, which brought them together, where we showcased different things that were happening in citizen science. So all of them, because we ran both the accelerator and the Citizen Science Prize. You ran a special session to introduce them to each other so they could learn from each other and could learn from the prize winners to see what has worked well for really successful projects, and also introduce them to the ECS project and the academy and the ambassadors. Again, I'm making an assumption here that some of this has already been mentioned in prior talks. Seeing as Muki is here, I can't imagine.
Yeah, we have mentioned that.
Thank you.
And there is an aperitif coming in later.
I think the next one is in November, if I'm not mistaken.
November, yes, it's coming this month.
Yeah, exactly. It's the time of the year. December would probably be too late because people start heading out for Christmas. So this is how Impetus ran. I want to go take a little bit of a step back and just run through what that could mean for you and how this actually worked. So one of the questions that Muki asked me when he asked me to talk to you was, what are the things that you actually need to have when you apply versus what can you learn on the program? Because the whole point of Impetus was to upskill people about citizen science, right? So we were not expecting every organization, every institution, and every individual that applied to already know the ins and outs of how this worked, of how to engage citizens, of how to do this well. If they already did, they probably didn't need us anymore. The accelerator is really there to provide upskilling, to provide support, to effectively hold people's hand as they run their first citizen science project. And about 2/3 of the projects we supported was really their first project. They had never done citizen science before. So what we were looking for in the applications that we received was that they were aiming for the right thing, that they were aiming for a project that could be delivered, a project where citizen science was a good solution to a problem, where they had the right philosophy about engaging with citizens and were doing it for the right reasons effectively. So to be inclusive, to achieve better results and all of that. It wasn't about knowing the ins and outs of everything already. It was about wanting to learn. It was about really benefiting from the support that we could provide, not just about we need some cash to do this thing that we already know very well. Those projects, by and large, didn't make it into the accelerator because, again, there was no benefit for them joining. What was necessary was a clear idea of what they wanted to learn. So the best applicants were really the ones that said, we want to run this project in, I don't know, biodiversity observation. We know the biodiversity elements, but we don't know about how to best engage citizen science. So we want to join Impetus so we can fill that gap. By and large, those were the projects that made it into the accelerator and that really benefited from it as well, because they got exactly the filler for those gaps that they had. Pitfalls, so things that go wrong at these multiple stages. The primary reason why we rejected projects was that they applied for the wrong thing. For example, we ran a project, a call on urban challenges, and they applied in a rural context. And we just cannot accept that because it's the wrong topic. So that was the primary issues. The second one was they made changes to this application form. That's why I said these are the rules, and if you don't follow them, then we can't help you. Like, you have to play by the rules that everybody else plays by. And if you decide that you want to break them, then unfortunately you lose your eligibility. In terms of so there's a couple more reasons, but those were really like 50% of the projects we rejected for eligibility reasons were those. At later stages, so during the review, the projects that didn't make it to the interview stage were the ones where the idea was weak or just was sort of fit into the challenge, but didn't really fit. It would be projects that had some element of citizen science, but it wasn't strong, it wasn't inclusive, it was too little engagement, it just didn't go far enough for what we wanted citizen science to be. And also if they weren't inclusive enough. So for example, if they were only accessible to a very specific wealthy part of the population, then they also wouldn't be deemed inclusive enough to really make it. And then at interview, the two main concerns we had, there was projects who just didn't seem to have a good enough idea about what they were actually doing. So maybe they sent a junior project manager who hadn't really been involved in the proposal or didn't know exactly what they were doing and wasn't able to answer questions. So those, by and large, that's a problem. That when we can't trust that you will actually be able to deliver the project, then we can't fund you. And also, if there were concerns about the ethics.
Gefion, close?
Yeah, I have one last slide.
Great.
Nearly there. So the primary advice I would want to give is just make sure you read the rules and follow them. Because if you don't, we will notice. And so will every other funder. That's their job. So don't try to shoehorn an idea into something the funder might want. Try to find the fund that actually works for the thing you want to do. Think through all of the elements and then prepare separately for each stage of that process. So you need a different preparation for a written application than for an interview, for example. And that is me. Thank you.
That's a brilliant way to finish this kind of set of presentations, because now you kind of heard from the side of someone who's doing both things at the same time, both being a recipient of a European project, but also being a funder. And you've got all the advice that you can take from this and from my suggestion, and hopefully it will help you. If you need more help, please feel free to email me about it. Yeah, any last question or last statement, Lukrina?
Well, if there are no other questions from the audience, are there? If not, I would like to thank you all. Thank you to the trainers. By the way, Gefion, we received an impetus grant. So yes, we implemented one. Thank you very much for your thoughts and your pieces of advice and tips and tricks. And yeah, we will keep in touch, and definitely the objects for open science from our laboratory university will continue to do these trainings and guidelines and everything that the researchers and the citizens need to do citizen science. So thank you very much, and goodbye to everybody.
Yeah.
You will receive the presentations and the recordings, right, Muki, from...
Yes, yeah, I will share with you the recording. You can upload them on YouTube. And I know we gave you a lot of information in these 3 hours. Hopefully it gave you the appetite to start thinking about proposal. It's always scary to do the first step, but do that, and then there will be more opportunities. Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Good night. Good evening. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.